He's considered an individual, although he's also a spirit, called the Antichrist. The Antichrist always has a false prophet. So you have the man, and then you have his prophet that does all the speaking. That's what's being set up here. God's saying to Moses, you will be like God, and then you will have a prophet, someone that hears from God, from you, and then does all the speaking. The mouth of God, if you will. Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to Embrace the Question. It's Bible study with me. We are in the fourth study of Exodus, the fourth chapter of Exodus. Sometimes we get through an entire chapter, as we proved in Genesis, and sometimes we don't. But this time we are in our fourth lesson, and we are on the fourth chapter. So we're staying up to date. There's a couple of things that I would like to bring out before we actually get into the text. One is Exodus itself. The definition of Exodus is a departure. So I want us to keep this thing in mind because there's a reason we're going through this book. It's probably the last Old Testament book we'll go through before we move to the New Testament, briefly at least. It's important to understand, one, the Genesis, which is our foundation, but two, the Exodus. Why a departure? Why the Exodus? And what does that have to do with us now? Two, it's the Hebrews that all of this is happening to, right? So the Hebrew means those who cross over, those who are passing through. So we have those who are by name crossing over, passing through, and they are making an exodus. All of this speaks to, one, journey, transition, change. There's a lot being said today, especially in the church, about just come as you are. But we don't make nearly enough of a deal. We don't put nearly the emphasis that we should on, yes, come as you are, but do not expect to stay the same. You will make an exodus. You will. If you know Jesus, you will become Hebrew in spirit and cross over. John 5, Jesus says, if you're in me, if you believe in me, then you have crossed from death into life. You have become Hebrew in that regard. Okay, number two, something to keep in mind here with our study of Exodus is the sense of time. We know that the Hebrews, the Israelites, spent approximately 430 years in Egypt. We do not know when the bondage started. We do not know when things got really bad. There is no verse that says on the 220th year of their sojourn in Egypt, things really just, got bad. It doesn't say that. In fact, in Exodus 1, it's bad already. The end of Genesis, what has happened? Joseph is still second only to Pharaoh, and Joseph's a good guy. Pharaoh's a good guy. But they've just undergone a famine, and everybody has had to sell all of their possessions to the government in order to survive. So at the end of Genesis, the state of the union is most everybody is in debt to the government, including the Israelites that are staying there. That's an interesting status quo, because nobody is an owner of anything at the end of Genesis. The government is basically big. Now it saved them, but it's what we would consider way too powerful to be comfortable. Exodus 1 rolls around, the people are oppressed by the government. Okay, Exodus 1 and 2, nearly a century has gone by because we've got Moses still arguing. We're in Exodus 4, Moses is still arguing about the assignment. He's 80 years old. Exodus 1, he's born. Exodus 4, 80 years old. Okay? Third thing I want to mention are the obstacles that we know that Moses is going to face. Okay, what have we been talking about? Well, he's concerned not only with Pharaoh believing him. That's half the obstacle. The other half is Israel believing him. So he's faced both with unbelief and a mental battle of sorts, a psychological warfare with both Israel and Egypt. Quite a mountain in front of Moses. I'm totally not judging him for not wanting to do this. Okay, so that's where we're at. Let's start with Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. Exodus 4, verse 1, here we go. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" It is unclear who he is referring to, because we've just had this argument in chapter 3. He's very much talking about Israel in chapter 3, that my brothers won't listen to me. Who shall I say sent me? And the Lord says, tell them that I am sent you. I am sent you. Who is he talking about here? Still Israel? We're going to find out that he's got the same concerns about Pharaoh, and the Lord is about to give him an answer to this question that he never poses before Israel. He poses it before Pharaoh. He poses this answer before Pharaoh. All right, let's continue. Verse 2. The Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" And he said, "A staff." And he said, "Throw it on the ground." So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, "Put out your hand and catch it by the tail." So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. A couple of things here. There's been many a sermon taught on this passage. What is that in your hand? What is it that you have? You have a problem? Do you have worries about what you're equipped with? What's in your hand? Let's use what you have. Okay, that's the basis of many sermons. However, there's some really cool, deep symbols going on here. One is Moses throws the staff down, turns into a snake. Who does it belong to? Well, the staff was Moses' staff. He throws it down, it becomes a snake. Moses runs. Okay, what's the snake symbolic of? Sin. We all have this issue, right? We all have, when we look to see actually what we possess, one thing we all can say, we possess sin. We sin. We throw the staff down, and there it is. We have the objective view. This is not pretty. I don't like this. We flee from it. God says, okay, now reach down and take it by the tail. The idea is to have dominion over it, own it, claim it. This belongs to you. If you can't admit that you have this problem, then you are stunted from the get-go. You have an issue from the beginning. It's the very same thing he says to Cain in the garden. Cain is angry, and he's angry with his brother for being accepted, and he's angry with God for accepting him, and he meets God and Cain have a conversation. God knows that Cain is seething, and he says, sin crouches at your door. You have to have dominion over that. You have to be able to control your anger, Cain. You have to be able to control your thoughts. You can't let it breed, because every reptile that breeds just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what we have in the beginning is a serpent. Cain's dealing with a snake, basically, the snake of his thoughts, his own sin. Will he have dominion over it? No, we know that he doesn't. He kills Abel. What happens at the end of the story? Revelation. The end of the scriptures is Revelation. The two bookends. Cain's dealing with the serpent. What do we find in Revelation? Dragon. What has the serpent done? It has grown. This is what happens when you don't own it. This is what happens. This is the whole picture, right? Moses is instructed. Reach down, grab the snake by the tail. It becomes something he possesses again. Okay. I think that's pretty cool. Verse 6. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. Interesting choice by the Lord, because leprosy was something that definitely got the attention of all in that day. There was no known cure. It was something that killed you slowly. It was something that caused you exile, because it was known to be contagious. You could not have leprosy and just stay home. You had to have leprosy outside the camp, outside the city. And that's what was going on in their day. This would have been a very intimidating sign. Verse 9. If they will not believe even those two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it out on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. This one's kind of interesting, because look at the progression. You have, one, a staff becoming a snake. That's impressive. We'll find out later that it doesn't impress Pharaoh. Okay, the hand becoming leprosy, a little closer to home. It's not something you can run from. You can't run from leprosy. Okay, but it only affects you. So while it's a different, horrible thing, it's still very localized. Third sign, blood, the water from the Nile becoming blood. This one's interesting. We know later that one of the plagues is that the entire Nile becomes blood. That's a major, major problem, right? In a desert, when you have no water to drink. You have nothing to water your plants with. You have nothing but death and stench and flies. This one's interesting, because God later says you can't eat the blood, because the blood is the life. Well, they didn't know that. To them, the water is the life. So God is making some statements here in these signs. This one where you're pouring out what should be life-giving water and it becomes blood on the ground. This one might have been very important to Pharaoh and his regime. This one might have gotten their attention, because now it's not localized. If the water of the Nile becomes blood, then you lose your nation. We know that it's not enough to convince Pharaoh. So let's continue. Moses is still arguing. Verse 10. But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servants. But I am slow of speech and tongue. What this might mean, we've always considered this to be, well, Moses is saying, I have a speech impediment. I am just not eloquent. I'm not good with words. Maybe I'm afraid of public speaking. We've taught a lot of things on this verse. It could be that he doesn't know Hebrew very well. He was raised in an Egyptian environment. He didn't have tutors that we know of that taught him Hebrew. He probably spoke some, but it might have been the problem. Verse 11, then the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? That very much indicates a physiological dilemma that maybe Moses had. Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what to speak. And that sounds more like eloquence. Verse 13, but he said, oh, my Lord, please send someone else. This is what it always comes down to, doesn't it? When you run out of excuses, it's like, okay, no, just send somebody else. Been there, done that. It's a last-ditch effort. And honestly, this is what makes the Lord mad at the end here. Verse 14, then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as a God to him. Here's what's interesting to me. We know that there is this pattern in Scripture where you have this individual. A lot of times he's considered an individual, although he's also a spirit, called the Antichrist. The Antichrist always has a false prophet. So you have the man, and then you have his prophet that does all the speaking. That's what's being set up here. God's saying to Moses, you will be like God, and then you will have a prophet, someone that hears from God, from you, and then does all the speaking. The mouth of God, if you will. That's fascinating because I have not seen that pattern. It's not established until right here. Okay. Moses is 80 years old. Aaron is 3 years older, 80 and 83. These are not youngsters. These are established leaders in their community. And it's all, the scene is being set. Okay. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. It's verse 17. And verse 18, Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are all still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. Normally, we fly through a verse like this. It is what it is. A little deeper than that, because in those days, in all of the early days, tribes were everything. Security, they were your community. You didn't just get to leave a tribe when you wanted to. You had to be sent in peace. They didn't want to lose anybody. It's like a lot of churches right now. Churches don't want to lose people. They will fight to keep you. They don't believe in raising up people and sending them out, which is what we're supposed to be doing. We want to get as many people in and keep them as we can, keep them the best we can so that we can be the largest community. That's very much the ancient tribal pattern. They wanted to have enough people to propagate the tribe into the future. So getting permission to leave is necessary. Verse 19, and the Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. This is an exact opposite of what happens to Jesus, who is in Egypt as probably a toddler. And the angel comes to Joseph and says, go back to Israel. All of the people who are seeking your life are dead, referring to Herod. So we've got a mirror going on here. So Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey. What does this sound like? And went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. Notice that. It's no longer his staff, it's the staff of God. We've had a transition happen. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Okay, many sermons taught again on this, and I'm not here to give you complete clarity, but why would God give Moses the power to be persuasive if he knows he's not going to allow the subjects to be persuaded? It's a great question. And why then? Why are we even doing this if God is not going to permit Pharaoh to let them go? Because he's allowing something to build. And remember, he does everything for his own glory and for his own purpose. So there's multiple things being accomplished here. It's not just about Pharaoh. God needs things to fill up so that they can boil over. I think that's probably a lesson for today as well, because, well, there are a lot of similar things going on in current events. We're wondering, when is all of this going to finally boil over? God is letting certain things fill up. As persuasive as we can be, he is going to harden hearts until the right time. Okay. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. Israel, my son. When you start looking at sonship in regards to God himself, he never asks anyone to call him father until Jesus comes along and says, this is how you pray, our Father. Okay, Jesus identifies him truly as Father. Long before that, the Father is saying, you, Israel, are my son. I believe before that, Adam was considered the son. All right, so what? Adam had a snake issue. Is that fair? Israel is going to have a snake issue. And Jesus is going to have a snake issue. He's going to face the devil in the desert in a 40-day fast, not a 40-year sojourn, but a 40-day fast. So all of these mirrors lining up. And each one is considered a son of God. So it takes a son to deal with the snake properly. We know that Adam didn't deal with the snake properly. Israel's not going to do too well either. It's going to take Jesus to deal with the snake and show us how to do it. Verse 24. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. This one seems like it's out of nowhere. Verse 25. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. This was so confusing to me. I think I have this one figured out. It's very much out of place in my mind. It's almost like an afterthought. God's having this conversation with Moses. Here's the plan. Here's what to say. Next verse, God's trying to kill Moses. That just seems like, okay, I forgot this detail. Let's go back and write it in. And Moses being the writer, that's what he does. So what's the point of this? What's going on is Moses has been living in Midian. Midian is not a land that's accustomed to following the covenantal rituals that Israel follows. What was Israel instructed to do per the Abrahamic covenant? Circumcise your sons on the 8th day. That didn't happen. That hasn't happened in Midian. So now, and probably it's because Moses was given a Midianite wife, Zipporah. I get the feeling she didn't want to do this. She didn't want to circumcise her son because, hey, this is Midian. This is not what we do. Now Moses is the head of his family, and God is going to kill him. The feeling I get here is Zipporah is like, fine, here's what we're going to do. She takes a flint, it's what they use for a knife, circumcises her son, throws everything down at his feet, and says, there, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. I think that's what's going on. Moses wasn't leading as he should. He let things slide, and God is dealing with him about, you cannot be mine and let things slide. Okay? You're in a leadership position. I am sending you to free a nation. You cannot let things slide in your own life. All right? Verse 26. So he let him alone. God leaves him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. All right, verse 27. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Mountain of God, Sinai, Horeb. Verse 28. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and did the signs in sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. It's a shift. When you figure out that the Lord cares, when you realize that God has heard your prayer, he has heard your cries in the darkness, seen your tears, a sense of peace comes. That's what's happening. They bowed their heads and worshiped, because all of this is new. We have Moses, we have Aaron, and something is brewing. It's the same feeling I get today. Well, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I really did. This is another very rich chapter, full of symbolism, lots of things to think about moving forward. We're ready for chapter 5, moving right along in Exodus. Before you go, visit my blog. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to go on this journey with you. We're not going to stop with Exodus only. Visit the blog, visit the Patreon page. If you're a Chosen fan, there's things on the Patreon page. I am only posting on Patreon. You need to grab yourself some Solway coffee, because this stuff is good. You can get it whole bean, you can get it in K-cups. Grab yourself some for your Bible study group or your Sunday school group and support a mission. Okay, this is all a kingdom business, and I promise you, your money is going to a great place and will return to you in more ways than just coffee, I really believe. Hope you have a blessed week. Till next time, peace.